Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. Today we're going to be doing an interview in air quotes because I still am not kind of feeling a little brain fogged and just down on things, and so I don't think I was a great interview here, but we're going to be doing an interview with a senior software architect. He's somebody that I know cares about right to repair. I know cares about ownership in general. He was a donor to my right to repair nonprofit from about 5 years ago, and he actually was a harsh critic of it when he didn't feel like I was doing everything that I was supposed to do to get things moving forward. I would rather speak to him than speak to somebody like Thor at Pirate Software because I have a working rapport with him. I know that he doesn't that he's coming from a good place, and frankly, if I had the choice to speak to somebody who is an influencer or somebody who has been a software architect for longer than Thor's been alive, I'm going to choose the latter all day long. So I'm going to just let this stream of consciousness play, make very, very minimal edits. It's more of a stream of consciousness than it is an interview. But hopefully this gives you some context on the movement and the software developer side of things when you were talking about the Stop Killing Games thing. And speaking of the whole thing where he gave me some fairly harsh criticism back in the day that I needed to hear when he didn't think I was doing everything I could, this brings me to the thing I have to discuss about my last video before I get into this one. There are comments that I'm getting from people saying that, like, you think that Ross deserves to fail because he didn't start a nonprofit or do all this extra stuff, and it's like, that's, like, again, not to do the RFK Jr. impression again, but like, that's not what I said. That's not what I said. I don't hate vaccines. I intensely dislike them. In all seriousness here, that's not what I said. Everything that I said in that video was said with love. He believes in ownership. I believe in ownership. Do you think I want to see him fail? Do you think I think he deserves to fail? Like, fuck no. I don't see anything like that. I don't think it's a betrayal if he decides that he would like to stop doing what he's doing. I'm suggesting that he take up the mantle of that responsibility, and I'm suggesting that he do things like make a plan so that he would feel comfortable with taking people's money, because it kills me inside. Like, it actually does. Hearing him talk about how a volunteer has ghosted him in some way, or he can't have expectations of them, but there's also no budget to pay somebody to do this particular thing and all that. And when he got to the point where he's saying, yeah, I have to get back to doing other videos. I've been neglecting things that would help me pay my rent. The reason that pisses me off is because I see all these people that want to help. I think Ross Scott is deserving of help in this movement. I think many of you want to help him with this movement. And I was somebody a long time ago who refused to take people's help because I'm going to do it myself, my way, and everything else. And I didn't let my audience and the people that cared about this help me. And things didn't go as well as they did once I started allowing people to help me. And when I see somebody like him talk about that, because he strikes me as an honest and hardworking dude. When I see an honest, hardworking dude say, like, I'm working 10 to 12 hours a day and I'm having issues paying my rent, he's not the type of dude that's going to say that shit just for the hell of it. He's the type. He strikes me, again, I've only spoken to him on the phone like 1 or 2 times, email back and forth a few times. He strikes me as somebody that's not going to say that shit unless it's really fucking affecting him. And that kills me. Like that. Sometimes I think for people like us, it's helpful if somebody comes along and politely, kindly, and respectfully looks at me and says, Lewis, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you making life harder for yourself? Why do you have to play life on hard mode all the time when your enemies are not? My enemies are always more than happy to work together. Apple will happily work together with Microsoft. Microsoft will happily work together with John Deere. John Deere will happily work together with somebody in the medical device industry, and they will all help each other in this disgusting, incestuous way if it means that I am even like just 1 inch further away from being able to fix something. Our enemies are all more than happy to help each other, and they have a lot of money to help each other with. We don't have that luxury. So when I see a large group of people that want to support somebody's initiative and they want to find a way, how can I financially support you? And that is not really there. And at the same time that's not really there, I see the person talking about rent and issues with that and issues with paying people because they're volunteers and them not doing the work that they need to do. It's like, it doesn't have to be this way. And I want to see it be a different way. It's not because I think you deserve to fail or because you're a fuck up or a loser or anything like that. Far from it. Rather, it's because I'm sick and fucking tired of seeing people on the wrong side of history playing life on easy mode. When we're here trying to make the world a better place, it's one thing, like, we already have the deck stacked against us. It's another if we go out of our way to choose to play life on hard mode. Because when we're talking about stuff like how making a plan and everything else could go wrong and all this stuff, the way I see it is you pay the bill up front, that you pay it every day for the rest of your life. And when I see somebody talking about their YouTube channel going downhill, their ability to pay rent going downhill, their ability to even find volunteers that will stably do the job go downhill because they can't pay them, so they can't have expectations of them, my brain interprets that as paying every day for the rest of your life with high APR. And I want to see people pay the bill up front. That's why I said, write the plan. Wish somebody gave me that fucking advice 15 years ago. Maybe they had right to repair by now. And like there are a lot of people that they send me these messages saying, Lewis, I want, like they don't say I want to hear your thoughts on this. They say, Lewis, can you make a video on this? And when I read that, I read that as I want you to say the things that you're supposed to say in the manner I want you to say them, rather than say what you think. And when I watched that video, that was the thing that affected me first. That's the first thing that I thought of. So that's what I included. I hope the people that are in my life do that shit to me. So I'll do that too. It came from a place of love. I want to see it succeed. I see people saying, Lewis, you think he deserves to fail because he didn't do this? Like, I didn't say that. Like, if that's what you took away from it, that's on you, not me. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm sick and tired of seeing the cunts on the wrong side of history winning everything and playing life on easy mode. And then seeing people on our side of it playing life on hard mode by choice. This is going to be one of the worst puns in the history of my channel. If we keep choosing to play life on hard mode, someday there'll be no game left to play at all. And with that, let's get on to the interview.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so just rewinding back to the very beginning of this, because I'm somebody who knows jack shit about modern games. I started gaming with my Game Boy in 1994, and I stopped gaming when I moved away from living with my folks in the mid-2000s. So there is so much that I don't even understand about how video games are made now. Obviously, I remember the days where you installed a video game, you put in your serial number, and it just worked. And if I were to still bring that Windows 98 computer back here and boot it up, I could still play that game. And obviously, things have changed a lot. So the first thing is, can you just give me an idea of the difference between a video game and a live service video game? Because I get single player versus multiplayer, but what is live service video game versus video game?
Well, I mean, well, I think what you're asking is single player video game versus a live service video game. So basically, a single player video game, an old video game, what you're talking about, installs on your local computer. It used to be back in the day, you would actually get the physical media for it. You can install it on your local computer. You have a permanent copy of it, basically, and it would run as long as you had hardware that would support it. A live service video game is something that runs in a data. Well, it has two portions basically. So it has a client portion that you would install on your local system. That portion has things like it takes care of the graphics and the sound, and it actually has the user interface and the portion you interact with. And then it has a data center portion, the back end, that handles all the networking and the rules and interfaces with all the other players and handles all that stuff. Also, for modern systems, handles anti-cheat and all sorts of other things. And that runs in the cloud. And that's sort of the difference between those.
So the movement has arisen as a result of people buying a game. They thought that they purchased something. They spent their $10 or $20 or $50, and then at some point, the thing they spent $50 for is a brick. And this is something that is aggravating that you seem to agree with. You've, back and forth in our conversations, you've said that when somebody does this, that this is kind of fraudulent. That this is. Can you? I don't want to put words in your mouth there, but what were you talking about when you were saying about how this is people using something as a service is an abuse of it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I specifically use the word fraudulent, but it's definitely not truth in advertising. It's not truth in marketing. I think people should know exactly what it is they're buying. So I mean, it's having live service or software game as a service games is a perfectly valid thing. Back in the day, I used to play World of Warcraft. That was a perfectly valid game as a service. And it was a subscription. You bought it. It ran in a data center. If you stopped paying for the subscription, you stopped getting it. It was that simple. But if you go to the store and you buy a game and it's a live service game and it requires services to run currently, there is an issue, and it does annoy the hell out of me that if you buy a game or software in general, there's all of these end user license agreement terms that you don't see until you until you buy the game or buy the software in general, and you open it up, and then you don't see those until you go to install it or whatever. And then half the time they have some weird terms of services, as you put. They redefine what purchase means on page 23 or something. That's bullshit. That is absolutely bullshit. They shouldn't do that crap. You should know before you buy the game or buy the software in general what it is you're buying, and they should have to adhere to those terms. But but as long as the terms are fair and you know what you're buying, that should be fine. As long as you agree to the terms, it should be reasonable.
Yeah, and the lack of you're right. You didn't use the word fraud. You had said that a lot of things today that 100% rely on cloud service for their operation are sold as one-time purchase products. It's true of video games and hardware products like Alexa, baby monitors, and that is dishonest and a problem. So you've called it dishonest in their marketing.
Yeah. They're not honest with what the customers are getting. They don't, and the customers don't know how long it's going to last or what the deal is or what kind of stuff. Like, I own Sonos speakers, and they're great speakers, but I do worry that at some point in time they're going to pull the plug on them, and I don't like that.
So the way I came to this as somebody who's completely ignorant of how modern games are built and programming in general is if you have a video game that requires a connection to the internet, that was because of some sort of digital rights management or activation. And now what they were doing is they were just purposely and evilly putting these services on a server somewhere so that they had an excuse to turn off the game at some point so you'd buy the sequel, which is the most cynical take that I understand why a lot of people have, because when you just look around at how ownership is being eroded, it's hard to not think that that's the reason that it's being done. And what I'm looking for from you is a little bit of pushback and also explaining to me why things are done the way that they are done so that I can gain an understanding of this. So what are the top items you think that somebody like me misunderstands when they're looking at the gaming landscape of the mid-2000s and just says, this is all just being done maliciously, why can't I just run my game locally when support is over?
So
what are we missing?
I definitely don't think that's the case for live service games, because everybody buys their games off Steam these days. Steam is beloved. I love Steam. Steam's great. PC gamers love Steam. Steam has built-in DRM. You basically have to be logged into Steam. You have to, in order to play your games. Nobody really complains about that. Gamers like and trust Steam. Nobody complains about this. It's kind of a miracle, but it's true. Nobody really complains about that. So that's not the case. That's already out there and kind of accepted. It's kind of weird, but it's true. So that's not true. That's already accepted. So you don't need live service games to get the DRM. The DRMs were already built into Steam, and nobody's complaining about it. So that's not true. So the only reason to have a live service game and to have servers now is because you actually want to have a live service game and have servers, because you don't need the added cost of setting up your own servers and running servers, which cost money to do, because Steam does the DRM for free. They don't charge you for that.
Now, I want to go to this video that I did on response to harsh criticism of Stop Killing Games, because you pointed out a couple of areas where I was wrong, and I wanted to dig into those because I was guessing. I was kind of reaching to try and figure out what the software development argument was for it. You had said that at 1036 that I was wrong. There's two reasons why, and that a lot of the code is licensed for use in these game servers. It's not written for game servers. It's written for a server. The multiplayer game industry is a tiny sliver of the cloud computing market. It's a rounding error. Most of these services are used for business to business and internal enterprise stuff. There's absolutely no way that any of these service companies are going to make concessions just so a fractional sliver can give away stuff to the public that is cut off the game industry. Can you expand on that? Explain what these services are that are being used and why it is that company would just rather say, screw this, I'd rather just cut off the gaming industry than comply as a...
Sure. I mean, part of my issue with the way the Stop Killing Games movement pushes this, I don't have a problem with the movement itself. I agree with the concepts. I don't like the way Ross pitches it, and he keeps saying it's trivial and it's easy and there's no reason that this would be a problem. He's obviously not a software developer. He doesn't know these things. So that very much annoys me, because he's talking about things he doesn't know and saying they're trivial. Yeah.
And I think this is a good point, because it stems into why somebody like Pirate Software or Thor would be angry or say things like, and I'm not saying it's hard for me to criticize somebody for doing this when I have had much more creative language on my streams. But when he's saying like "fuck this movement," this can eat my entire ass, not just part of the ass. I was trying to understand the aggravation, and when you look at the FAQ, I think that's what you're talking about. Would this would this bankrupt companies? It is unlikely. Isn't what you're asking for. And I'm trying to find the section where it specifically says no.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Thor's stuff, but I mean, he seems like an asshole. Let's be honest. So I think the way he was saying things was obviously not very nice. But from the limited things I've seen, and I haven't seen all of his stuff by any means, but he had some valid technical points. But that thing specifically, where I was trying to go is, like, I've seen a couple of diagrams Ross made about what the server architecture would look like for one of these things, and it was so incredibly simplistic. It was laughable. A modern cloud architecture would have many microservices and components and all sorts of stuff going on. Systems built in AWS cloud and whatnot would have a whole bunch of different architectural pieces plugged into them, and a bunch of those have nothing to do with the gaming industry. They're not specific to the gaming industry. They're for other industries and stuff, and so they're not going to allow the gaming industry to release that code to the public or whatever. And if they go to them and go, "Oh, hey, we need to release this up to the public because whatever," they're going to say no. And if they go, "Well, we need," if they're going to try to leverage that or whatever, they're going to say, "Well, the game industry is this 0.01% of our business because we're AWS and we have this huge market." They're not going to have any leverage over that, is what I was saying.
I didn't realize how many of these different services there were. Like, I didn't realize that there were AWS has numerous different gaming services, and there's Azure Gaming Global, there's a Photon Engine, and there's oh my god, fuck these cookie notices. So for instance, let's say with something like Photon Engine, it seems like their entire business seems to be the gaming industry. But
yeah.
But I hear what you're saying with AWS.
Right. So there's different things. There are middleware and third-party components and third-party software things that do specifically write things for the gaming industry. But there's also, most of the cloud market is not gaming industry. It's the software industry in general. Yeah. So basically, there are a bunch of components that are written specifically for the gaming industry. There's a bunch of third-party software and components and middleware and whatnot that does target the gaming industry. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that's just for the software industry and business to business and whatnot. And gaming servers would use a lot of that as well.
Okay, so now I didn't have any idea of how many different services there are here until I looked it up and you started sending it. So it was AWS, Azure, GCP, Reddit. You have Photon, Agonist. I'm mispronouncing half of this shit. You have Valve Anti-Cheat, Fairfight, Vivox, Discord Rich Presence, Steam SDK, PlayStation Network or Xbox Live SDKs, Game Analytics, Datadog, Splunk, Amplitude. There's a bunch of other shit here too. That's literally 31 pages of shit.
I threw that together in like 20 minutes just to show you an example.
And there's way more of them. There's a lot more of them. I mean, there was I would be curious.
There would probably actually be more of those included even. That was just a sample.
So let's say a developer uses a proprietary third-party library that legally can't be redistributed. So how do you handle a scenario where the server code depends on licensed middleware like Havoc Physics or a proprietary networking library? Is stripping proprietary stuff as simple as the proponents would ask it to be? Because when I'm looking at the initiative, I think the thing that would bother a software developer, maybe that would trigger somebody like Thor on a bad day, if I'm being charitable, isn't it impractical? Not at all. What about large-scale MMORPGs? Not at all. Not necessarily. Not at all. In fact, it's kind of like he makes it sound like this. It's going to be easy, and I can understand how if you're looking at that as a software developer or as a senior software architect, understanding all these different systems, thinking, what do you mean it's not impractical? Now, from my point of view, when I made my video, I was thinking of this like looking at one of the servers that I have here, where, okay, there's 17 different services that all need to talk to each other. I have a Docker Compose file. I talk Docker Compose upd. It just works. Can you explain why I'm ignorant? What I'm getting wrong there when I'm thinking, why can't I just get a YAML file, type Docker Compose upd, and then play my game?
Yeah. So, I've actually been thinking about this a bit over the last couple of days, and I think it really depends on the game and the scale of the game and the type of the game and what it is. Some games can be architected so that they could be so that they could have a server component that would be releasable to the public. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. Some things could be done that way, but some other ones would be extremely difficult, and it really depends. So, looking at because I've been watching some videos by other software engineers talking about this. And I get the impression that they're probably talking about PvP games. And
I'm allergic to acronyms. So when you say PvP,
player versus player.
Okay, cool.
So like battleground games and whatnot, like Call of Duty or something. So these are actually a lot simpler than some other types of games. So basically, the players log in, they go into a lobby. I'm simplifying quite a bit, but there's a system that match makes them. They load into a battleground, basically a virtual battleground. That battleground has no state. They always show up the exact same way. People run around and shoot each other, basically. And then when that battleground's over, it just gets thrown away. And everything just takes place in that one battleground. So you really only need one kind of server that just hosts that battleground. And it's kind of simplistic. That probably is doable if they wanted to put in the extra energy and time to make something like that so that it could be released. But then if you took a massively online role-playing game like, let's say, World of Warcraft, that is vastly more complicated. That has in-game open world, you've got zones, you've got instant dungeons, you've got instanced raids, you've got
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but when you say instant dungeon or instant raid, I don't know if that's because I'm technically illiterate, video game illiterate, or both, but what makes that more difficult than a game from 2005, or at least what makes it technically complicated from a cloud service architecture point of view?
Well, all of these would be different servers, probably. So where the PvP battleground thing would probably only need one main server to host that battleground. A serious MMORPG might have, and if it's been around a long time and had multiple versions and kind of stuff, it could have 20, 30, 40, 50 unique distinct servers that serve different types of content within the game system. So in order to run it, you might actually have to spin up 20 different servers, not one.
Well, I guess my two questions there, and I apologize if this is rapid fire and a bunch of things at once that are general. One, what would you need multiple servers for versus, let's say, having one server that just has all the different versions of the game? Or the second one would be, let's say it does require multiple servers. I'm a complete moron. My IQ is lower than room temperature in New Hampshire, not even Texas. And I was able to set up a complete self-managed mail server that when I run Docker ps-a, it's like 17 or 19 different containers running using fairly simple documentation. So I have 17 different servers running just for my mail server, and they all just spin up beautifully. It's not like I have to worry about dependencies or how does this talk to that, or do I have the wrong version of PHP installed for my operating system. So with modern architecture, what makes that difficult for the end, for either the programmer, the designer of the game, or for the end user with modern architecture? Like, I'm not saying it is easy. I just want to, because I realize a lot of the ignorance, the gaps in my knowledge I have, maybe people in the audience do too who are not programmers. So I'm trying to ask questions in the hopes that you'll be able to show me where I'm talking out of my ass, if I am, which I probably am.
Right.
because I'm a YouTuber.
I'm not saying it's. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's infeasible for most people. So you have 17 Docker containers that pop up and run 17 different types of servers. Is what you're saying?
Yeah. So like I just copied and pasted some of Malcow's the Docker Compose file that they had, and then I have to put in a couple of my own variables, like some things for SMTP relay, what my provider is, domain. But for the most part, I take their Docker Compose file, and I can just take that thing, and now I just type a couple of things, and I didn't have to set up 17 servers. It just sets them all up for me, and they all talk to each other very nicely. And somebody could scale that setup to if somebody wants to scale this setup to run, I don't know, Gmail or Fast. I mean, they're not going to want to use that stack, but they could use that same stack and scale it incredibly based off of the same tools that they're giving me.
First of all, I'm in one of Ross's videos, he was saying that it's probably not even acceptable to require Linux for a server, because that's probably beyond most people's capabilities. And now you're saying just spin up 17 copies in Docker.
I'm using Docker as an example because that's what I imagine is it's the easiest, it's the most widely used, and like I really do think that it's simple in contrast to if I had to install 17 different fucking servers and make sure they all worked. Give me your pre-made YAML file. I type one command and it just works. It's like I see it as beautiful and simple, but my personal stance on this is that if you want to host the game yourself, if you want to do the shit, like here you go, set up your own server. If you don't. Like, you know, if I'm telling you that you have to use OS 2 or something, that's one thing. I'm being a dick. That's malicious compliance. But yeah, I think that it would be reasonable to tell somebody, yeah, if you want to host this yourself, you like go install Rocky Linux or Ubuntu server and learn Docker and have fun.
That would be beyond the capabilities of most people, and I don't think that would be acceptable to most people. But also, the problem is that the way these servers would be written is that they would require a lot of cloud services. So, in order to talk, when you have a bunch of different services like this, they need to talk to each other. So you need services for them to talk to each other. So they would be written to talk to each other with things like Amazon Q services and Amazon databases and that kind of stuff. And you're not going to have Amazon databases running locally, and you're not going to have Amazon Q services running locally. And so
is the idea you would have to have a different networking and a different database system to take the game from online to offline? Like to be using Docker networking versus AWS networking, it would require a different parallel structure to be made for the game.
And it depends on how it's architected. So Amazon actually provides a bunch of services specifically designed for massive online games that make them. Now I haven't worked with these personally, but I know they exist to make them scale better. If they wrote it using those do not come out. Those do not come out of Amazon. So if the game was written to rely on those, you'd have to rewrite large portions of the game not to use those.
So I could see how when you're reading this, or if somebody is a software developer reads this and they see like, no, not at all, or not at all, it's actually, or if this process can be trivial and relatively simple to implement, that would it be safe to say that when you're reading that's the kind of stuff that causes a little smokestack goes to start coming out of your head, or that like.
Yeah, it's complete bullshit.
Because I'm trying to get to the point of him saying, like, when Thor is saying, "Eat my entire ass." Again, I'm not like, I'm not defending.
Right.
I would not want to get a drink with Thor, right? But
that is completely insulting, and he's an asshole. But it is absolutely not trivial. I'm not saying it's impossible.
But you feel like you're being. Is it that you feel like you're being trolled when you're reading that? Is that kind of what it is? Like,
yes, absolutely.
Because if you said, "Listen, this is difficult, but here's why I think it's a good thing," versus "Nah, that's trivial." Like, I think I'm trying to understand where that aggravation and anger came from.
Right. I don't even. Okay, I'm not even going to say I necessarily agree. Like, if you're subscribing to a game as a service, like let's say World of Warcraft, I don't necessarily believe that you're due the servers at the end of that. You haven't bought the servers. You're agreeing to subscribe to a service.
And this comes back to something else in the FAQ. So when it was talking about intellectual property, one of the questions that you had talked about is, wouldn't what you're asking for here force the company to give up its intellectual property rights? Isn't that unreasonable? And the answer in Stop Killing Games FAQ is no, we would not require the company to give up any of its intellectual property rights, only allow players to continue running the game that they purchased. In no way would that involve the publisher forfeiting any of their intellectual property rights. So
which is also bullshit.
But the part that would confuse me mildly is, well, running the game that we purchased. Well, there's that difference between a game like The Crew versus a game like the modern version of World of Warcraft, where you're paying for a service as it's ongoing. But secondly, if you are dealing with a live service game that is client server architecture, and you bought the client, you didn't buy the server. Now, the company that I worked at for 3 years, Futo, one of their main principles is every single piece of software that we sell you, if we are selling you a client, we are also going to make available the server. One of their principles is just one of the reasons that the modern anti-ownership economy exists is because companies sell the client without selling the server, and they think that that's a shitty thing to do. And in many cases, I think it's a shitty thing to do. But from a factual point of view, the server is intellectual property. So if you bought the client, but now you're asking for the client and the server, whether or not you think it's right as a moral argument, from a factual point of view, you are asking the company to give up intellectual property. Am I wrong here?
And sometimes, depending on what the service is, sometimes it's not feasible.
You were saying that sometimes, even if they wanted to give up the intellectual property, the indie game developer, that they would not be able to give you the server software.
Yeah. So I mean, indie developers, a lot of indie developers use third-party components. Like if you go to Unity or Unreal, they have asset stores where you can buy a lot of components. When they license those, frequently they get the code to them, but they're not allowed to give that code out. So if they wanted to, if they buy a bunch of those, and a lot of times they do, because it speeds up their development, and a lot of times that those assets are really good. They're either better than the indie developer themselves could build, or they're as good as they could build, and they're a lot cheaper than the amount of time it would take them to build them. So it's a very good thing for indie developers. It's actually a lot of the reason why indie developers can actually build games now. So it's a good thing. But that means they don't own the rights to everything that's in their game. So if they were going to open source their game, for example, huge, massive portions of their game would not be capable of being open source, which would make their game basically useless. I mean, it would be worse than Swiss cheese. They just wouldn't be able to.
So I think you're talking about the case of there's $250,000 in the bank. I'm working with 3 of my friends, and that's the indie video game developer studio. And we're working on the higher end elements of the big picture elements of the game at a broad level. But I'm not creating the physics engine for the cars. I'm not doing everything else, and that I would be paying for the services for all these different things that I don't want to build myself.
How much? No, I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about the indie developer that's got $1,000 in his bank and is working out of his bedroom too. I'm talking about everybody.
So the idea is, if you have an indie developer, whether it's somebody with $1,000 working in their bedroom or $250,000 working with 5 of their friends full time versus Electronic Arts, those people are not going to be developing their own in-house, I don't know, physics engine, game engine, for a bunch of tree engine, for all these different things, but they can pay for a service that will provide that, and that allows them to focus on the other elements of the game and be able to make it, rather than spend all of their money getting bogged down in one detail that they can't do.
Right. Now most of these things do allow them to release the binaries. So for the client games. Now some of the things that are client server may not allow them to release the server portions though. Like if it's anti-cheat or whatnot. Indie game developers might be able to get those, and they may not be able to release those portions. But indie games developers tend to be smaller, so their servers tend to be a lot simpler. So it would be easier for them to basically build their server so they could pull those portions out. Yeah. So for the record, I'm also very pro ownership. How we got talking a long time ago is, I donated to you for right to repair. I'm very pro ownership, and I'm very pro right to repair. But I also think, that companies have a right to do business, and companies have a right to have services, as long as everybody is in agreement with things. Like I use the example with you on a gym membership. gym memberships are perfectly viable. I mean, if you get a gym membership, you have rights to go and use the equipment of the gym membership, but you don't have ownership in the stuff at the gym membership. It's the same thing with a software as a service or a game as a service. You have rights to use the stuff, but you don't have ownership over the stuff. It's the same concept. There's no differences in it.
When we talk about it hurting indie game developers, I'm trying to come up with some scenarios as to where this would hurt an indie game developer, because we're saying no, not at all, or no, this will be easy. One of the things that Ross was saying is that if let's say that this company will not make these things available as part of their licensing terms, that another company would pop up that would, because they wouldn't want to lose the entire EU gaming market. What
I was specifically worried about with the hurting indie game developers was he was talking about it being retroactive.
I've seen it said that it was not going to be retroactive, but I've also heard many people say that they see that as an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, the original stuff I saw from him, it seemed like he wanted to be retroactive. If it was retroactive, that could have bankrupted some indie developers, I would have thought. If it's not retroactive, I think that'll be a lot easier.
Because I think it isn't retroactive, but I have also seen people say I wish it was, and I think there's the people that say I wish this was retroactive. I think that they may be of the minds that this is similar to with right to repair, where I'm saying, make this schematic available to me. You have a PDF on your computer, even if you're not selling the product. It's a different level of burden than how do I untangle all of these services and then replace them with something else that does the same thing, and then figure out how to make them all work together on a game that I sold 5 to 10 years ago.
Exactly. And if you're an indie developer and you've built a live service game, or you've built something that has that kind of stuff and it's out there, and this was retroactive, and you don't have much money, that could be very bad for you. That kind of worries me.
Let's say it's not retroactive, and let's say that you're an indie developer and this passed tomorrow. Can you explain what some of the difficulties could conceivably be, if there are any? Like, I'm trying to imagine the worst case scenarios.
Well, for most indie developers don't make live service games, but for the ones that do, it would require them well, depending on the details, it might mean that they might need to hire lawyers, and lawyers can be expensive. So there is that, and then it might mean that they need to do some extra work to make sure they're in compliance. So there are those things to consider. But I don't think it would be, I mean, depending on the details, I don't know what gets passed. So there might be things that they need to deal with, but I would hope it wouldn't be onerous. That would be my hope. I mean, I do like the idea of this thing, and I am behind the initiative in general, as long as it's done responsibly.
What are the elements that make you feel like it's being done responsibly, and what would you want to see tweaked so that it would feel like it was being done responsibly?
I want to see it done in such a way that, one, that's not retroactive, and two, it's done in such a way that you can still have software as game as a service games, as long as it's clearly marked on the packaging. Like, for example, it should be before you buy it, you should know exactly what you're getting. Let's say there should be a set term of service. It should say, this game's going to run for 5 years or 10 years, whatever it is. You should know exactly what you're getting. Or there should be a subscription, or whatever it is, but you should know upfront what it is you're buying. If you're buying a single player perpetual license, you should get a perpetual license. If you're buying a live service game that requires servers, you should know how long you're getting for it. You should know exactly what you're getting, and you should get exactly what they say you're getting.
What is my next question?
I think that's reasonable.
I can understand when they say, well, if you would have to put an expiration date on the packaging. If they put an expiration date on the packaging, that's okay. For something that I buy, I'd never want to see an expiration date in the packaging. For a live service game, I understand why they would not put an expiration date in the packaging, because I don't know at what point it's not going to be feasible. Like, I may not know when the licensing term for this one library that I'm using is going to quadruple in price at the same time that my user base declines. So I think for a live service game, it would be very, very difficult to have a date set on when we are going to end this. I don't see how you do that without the date either being premature, as in we've ended the ability to use the game before it's time, or we are just lying and putting it too far out in the future. Because how am I going to know at which point it's not profitable? How am I going to know when this particular library that I really need to run this game, that I cannot afford to roll my own of, is going to quadruple in price at the same time that my user base goes down or something. It's impossible to predict those type of things.
That is an area actually that could affect indie games. That could be problematic for indie games. But for larger studios, I'm kind of in agreement with you and like, let them deal with it. They'll figure it out. They make enough money. I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah, and the initiative made mention of you can't have a different standard for an indie video game company for a large one, and I agree with the idea that you can't. If you're going to have a rule, it's either moral or not, it's allowed or not.
So, but the thing is, those kinds of stuff you can figure out generally. The way software works, a lot of the stuff. The way the licenses work, you can get licenses long enough that could probably cover that. The AWS services, indie developers aren't likely to use stuff that's going to be really expensive because they can't afford it. So I'd honestly have to really research and think about this to be able to give a really good answer on it. Because I haven't thought about this. Yeah, but but Louis, this is a good question. This is a really good question.
Yeah, one of the things you had said is like it seems like this wants it to be about all games, period. As a career software developer, this is unreasonable. Software written to run on a server and never intended to be made available to otherwise is perfectly legit. Everyone isn't entitled to everything just because. I believe in ownership, but I'm never going to own Gmail or Facebook or YouTube. And why is a game a special snowflake that they don't apply to and their server software has to be given out? I agree it should not be marked as a one-time permanent purchase, and that's we're in complete alignment. Maybe you're paying for money for a 5-year limited license or something. And fuck Sony, and also yes, fuck Sony. but that forced me to think about this. If you're saying that, well, I was paying a monthly fee to have this to pay for this service, and after the service is no longer there, I want to be able to have access to it. It does open the question of, well, wait, why are games a special snowflake in the software as a service world, but nothing else is? Right. And like, I didn't think of it that way. The forum that I met some of my best friends today on, we were talking on this music forum back almost 25 years ago now. Wow. And this was, about 25 years ago. And that forum got shut down around 2006. If I say, people will go to archive.org and find stupid shit I said when I was 11 years old on the internet, which we can't have that happen. But
tell me later when we're not recording.
Well, absolutely. But yeah, when that forum got shut down, I mean, well, why can't I have access to the server copy or to be able to run that on my own? I mean, it sounds silly, but when you asked me it was a philosophical question that I was forced to think through. Because originally I was viewing this through the lens of, this is a game, I paid $100 for it, why the fuck does this ever stop working? But when you're talking about this game is a game that's $5 a month, well, if this game is $5 or $10 a month and it's a service and it lasts for 4 years, and then once the service is done I stop paying, well, that's different. However, but I also, it's weird. It comes into this like healthcare thing where when they talk about Medicare for all, they talk about banning private health insurance, because if you say that you're allowed to have truth in advertising, then everybody will just sell their shit as a service, even if it's a single player fucking game that doesn't have to connect to the internet, so that they have the ability to turn it off. So the way that you get rid of that is by just saying, no, we're going to apply this to everything. But then if you apply it to everything, then there's this weird thing where, well, like if a video game that's a service that you're paying for access to the service, you must have access to forever after they turn it off. Why can't that be true of everything?
Yeah,
it's a weird fucking place to. It's a weird fucking place to go. Because what about movies? I mean, right now, movies, Netflix, everything else. There are certain titles that come out on Netflix, or there are certain titles that come out on certain streaming services where there's not a physical Blu-ray released. Like, I like Black Mirror. Correct. I was able to buy Black Mirror, but there are episodes of things that show up digitally that I'm not legally allowed to download. But if I legally cannot download it, then once that goes away, it goes away forever, and I hate that shit. But simultaneously, and I think that's where the aggravation here stems from, is I like that you can't get rid of services, but at the same time, everything has become so fucking abused and forced into the thing of a service, and people are just kind of clawing for any little piece of ownership back.
Right, and see that is the thing. It's like there are bad companies that are bad actors that have bad business practices. Those are problematic. Those need to be dealt with. But you can't punish the industry as a whole. You can't kill games as a service just because there's a few bad actors.
And then the argument there becomes, well, you're not killing a game as a service. You're just saying that after the service is done, that has to become a normal game, which is really saying you have to convert your live service game into a standard game when it's done. And I think the backlash from at least the software development community is that it's one thing if we sold you Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver and we're just modifying the game so that it now works again on the console the same way that it did in 1995 when I first got it, by removing the bullshit we put in there that makes it not, versus this game was fundamentally at its core never made to run that way, and you want us to make it run that way. And this goes back to when Thor was saying, if this did not apply to live service games, I'm cool with it.
Right. When I architect something that's made to run in a data center, I do it completely different than if I'm going to architect something that's meant to run on computer systems, on consumer systems. It is fundamentally different. I design it differently. The whole thing is different. I would design it from the ground up differently.
I think is this a good analogy, that being asked to take something that you would design in this way and then in a short period of time make it run in this other way, kind of like be asking you to write with the opposite hand very quickly with perfect handwriting? Is that like the visceral reaction you get in your head?
That'd be a reasonable analogy. It's just not. Yeah, it's a very different thing. And if you design it so that it can be run on consumer hardware later, that means it's going to run poorly in the data center.
Can you explain some of the considerations that are taken here? Not even just with video games. Just give me like an example and a consideration and why it would be made one way or the other.
Well, I mean, data centers are completely different beasts. The computers there have many more cores. They have much more memory. They have all those services available. I told you, you have all these different components available. Everything is designed differently. I mean, the whole thing is just different. It's just so fundamentally different. It would be like if you were going to write a story in English versus German. It would be different, and it would have different connotations in the two different things.
One thing that I want to talk about, where you had called me a comedian. So when I was talking about what somebody could do, let's see. I just want to make sure I find the exact.
I don't remember that, so remind me.
Oh, it was the one point in my video where 1740. So that was where I was saying this. We're going to give you the stuff you need to set up a server. We're going to give you all the internal documentation. This game is 9 years old. Sorry, why can't somebody do that? And you had that in your comment on that was, have you considered a career as a comedian? I laughed so hard I almost fell over. Internal documentation 404. Empty file folder. What documentation? Dude, most corporations have truly lousy and almost non-existent internal documentation. You don't understand that because you created a wiki to document and educate the world about repairs to figure it out, which, by the way, I still had no internal documentation. I had YouTube videos that I would refer new hires to, which I wouldn't have even... Yeah, but you don't. You are weird. We are not normal. I get this too because I'm weird and not normal in other ways. The vast majority of humans loathe documenting things and simply don't, even when they are told to. And there's a corporate mandate to. When there is a corporate wiki and a page where the information is supposed to be, and a JIRA assigned to them to write it, it never gets done, and they never get in trouble for not doing it because nobody does it. And yeah, I've asked my employees at times to make certain documentation, and I run into the exact same thing where I can't get you in trouble for it because nobody does it and nobody will do it, which would mean that I would have a company of no people, which obviously you can't fire everybody. And also, if I had that rule, I'd also be firing myself.
That's the other thing. A lot of these systems, sometimes people don't actually know how they work anymore. A lot of these cloud systems, they're put together like during development, like they figure out how these things work and they sort of bootstrap them and they get them up and running. And then as they're running, they get modified and adjusted, and they evolve over time. This might be a little bit less with like a live service game that gets deployed one way and always runs the same thing and never gets any updates. That'd be a little bit simpler. But like I keep saying, if you go to a complicated MMO that gets multiple releases and changes over the years, that would very much apply to this. If it changes over the years and they get updates and whatnot, people make adjustments and stuff, it's not the same as when it started. It keeps getting changed. Nobody documents this. Nobody makes any notes. So nobody knows how everything fits together. There's probably, nobody knows how to put it back together. It's running. It's up and running right now. They make backups of it, maybe. Hopefully they make backups of it. Although
I run a data recovery company, and I could tell you there are some very large companies that do not make backups of shit.
Yeah, I actually know that. I know that there was a large financial corporation that didn't even have backups. I know there's even companies that don't have backups. So that isn't necessarily the case. So maybe nobody even knows how to get this thing back up and running the way it is. So how are they supposed to figure out how to make this thing run on a consumer? They don't even know how to make it run again on their own systems.
And this is where, like, I hear with the developers are saying, man, this is a lot of shit you're shoveling onto me. But me as a consumer, I'm going to look at that and say, QQ, I paid $100 for this, or I paid $20 a month for the last 6 years. And you're telling me that for the $20 a month I paid for the last 6 years, you don't even know how to run this thing so that it can continue working. Sounds like a you fucking problem, bro. Like, I would see that as kind of like if I took a sick day and nobody at my store could fix anything because I left garbage documentation, and you're putting a burden on me by asking me to have a coworker that goes through your repair for you when you pay for an expedited fee or something. Like that really, it's hard for me to be sympathetic for the company. And when you're saying that, I hear that from the real world standpoint of here's why that's a joke. And yes, when I said internal documentation, I can't believe how deadpan I was in that video. Like look at my face in this. I mean, I'm okay. Actually, it's almost. I don't think I'm looking at the camera. I think I'm looking at the screen next to it or something. But I wasn't laughing, which is crazy because it was a laughable comment. Internal documentation.
But say, I also get that. But here's this thing too. You say, okay, you've paid this money for this 6 years, right? Mm-hmm. You got no value out of it. You got no fun. You got no entertainment out of that for that 6 years. Of course, you got value out of that. So it's not like you didn't get anything out of it. That amount of money you paid is a tiny little fractional, less than drop in the bucket compared to how much it costs to run these backends and how much it would cost to reverse engineer that thing.
I think the thing is, things always used to get better and get better and get better, and now it's like they get better, but then you take one step back and like better and one step back, and it's like, yeah, I did get enjoyment out of that, but I also used to get enjoyment out of shit that just didn't disappear forever after I paid for it. Yeah. And I guess the argument is you agreed to the terms are fair, and I get that, but
I get that too, but the world's not perfect. We don't live in a perfect world, unfortunately.
We could.
I wish we did. It would. Hey, you know what? If we could push a button and the software would be available for people in their houses, I'd be all for it. That would be fucking fantastic. We can't do that.
Maybe when the Chinese leak the next version of DeepSeek, there'll be a button and you press
it. Hey, you know what? If the AIs if they invent UBI, if they invent AGI and it doesn't kill us, and the AGIs can rewrite all these things to run in the home computer, then great, the problem's solved.
Now, one of the things you were talking about is that this is the core fallacy. Every time I hear a movement talk about the multiplayer servers, we're referring to games that are at least a decade old, often older. The older the game, the simpler the technologies, and the easier it is to make public. Can you, as somebody who doesn't understand jack shit of this, explain to me the difference between modern games that get turned off and games that are referred to as, look, see, they were able to make it keep working. Why can't you keep doing that? What is the difference? What are the differences in the architectures? If you could explain it so like a moron like me could understand it.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at a game 20 years ago, AWS didn't even exist. I mean, there was no such thing as the cloud. There was no such thing as microservices. So there was nothing incorporated into it. It was a big monolithic server that they totally wrote in house. Now, I've heard this in some of the videos and seen in the comments. Everybody's like, well, they should just go back to that. That's not how things work. Part of the reason companies can make bigger games is by being able to use these services. These services lower the cost of development and improve the server. By using these services, you're basically outsourcing to get the best of breed. These services are basically done by experts who all they do is focus on how to do this one particular thing. Like you mentioned car physics on something, right? So the people who write the library that does car physics, that's all they do. Some dude out there probably spent 10,000 hours writing car physics. That guy knows more about coding car physics than anybody you're ever going to find. So his car physics are better. If all the studios try to write their own car physics, nobody's going to have that much experience writing car physics. So they're not going to be as good as his.
And then they're
so
also going to spend all their time running car physics too, instead of developing the rest of the game.
Right. So you're actually better off licensing out, outsourcing, using the third-party stuff. You get better quality stuff, and it costs less. So it ends up resulting in better results and better games, but you sacrifice it in that you end up using third-party stuff. It's trade-offs.
So is this kind of like for like me importing a Python library and just typing dot something instead of writing my 70 pages of C code to do something?
So software architecture is all about making trade-offs. What we do all day is decide which trade-offs to make.
That makes sense. Yeah, the idea here is that I could either spend the next 4 years of my life trying to write something that's going to be 5% as good as the company that's already perfected it before I make my game, or I can just license your thing and then use that to make my game and focus on all the other elements of my game rather than focusing on this one teeny tiny aspect of it.
Exactly. You license out, you buy all the things that are common and available, and then you focus your time making the things that are distinct and unique to your game.
Okay, I was kind of curious as to like if the initiative were written in a bad way, what would be the ways that this would hurt an indie that's trying to develop the game? Like how would it be made harder for them? So I'm hearing that if I was an indie studio, the thing that would be harder is I'd have to figure out how to. I'm assuming that the worst case scenario would be that many of these service providers would say, I don't feel like giving you guys a license to give your customers the server binary. Like, no, we're not doing that. Figure out how to make your own of XYZ widget. And then the indie would say, I can't make XYZ widget. I have 2 people working for me. I give up.
Right. Well, it depends on the indie. I mean, the indie could just decide to not do that particular type of thing and decide to build a different type of game that didn't need that widget. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's indies are very flexible. They could just decide to build a different type of game or do something different. The smaller your company, the more agile you are. So they could kind of maybe weave around it. I don't know.
So going through the longer explanation, this was one of the things that it was a blue blob of text in the video, but it wasn't on the Stop Killing Games website, was the different tiers of games. Games sold as a one-time purchase with no stated expiration date that do not require a connection to the publisher or affiliated parties in order to function at the time of shutdown. No impact because these games already meet the requirements. There's games sold as a one-time purchase with no stated expiration date that require a connection to the publisher or affiliated parties to function. Publishers would be required to implement an end-of-life plan so that their support would no longer be necessary for the game to run once it's shut down. Games that are completely free, no impact because no commerce is involved. Microtransactions for games sold as a one-time purchase with no stated expiration date. The publisher would be required to implement an end-of-life plan when support ends so that the customer's microtransaction would not be permanently disabled. This would necessitate having the game it was sold for in a functioning state, even if the customer might not be entitled to the game directly. Games that are sold as a service with a stated expiration date, we would attempt to require publishers to have some sort of end-of-life build when support ends, but would probably fail as there is no basis in consumer law for this. Our only justification would be via art and culture preservation laws, which are very weak. None of these games are sold. Games that are sold. So the games that it doesn't have a mark here for games that are sold as a service without a stated expiration date.
Yeah. The materials say different things in different places depending on where you read them. It's part of the issue. I'm not really sure what they're pitching because depending on where you read it or which video you listen to, he says different things.
I have not listened to every single one because there are several live streams that sometimes are longer than an hour. I read the initiative, I read through that, and I found that blue piece of paper that you were looking at, not the blue sheet that you were looking at to read it, to get an idea.
Yeah, I was trying because I haven't listened to everyone either, but I listened to enough to hear different opinions. So I was trying to figure out what it was that it was actually about, because I was trying to get a factual opinion of it, and I heard enough of them to hear contrary opinions from Ross, so that I didn't know what it was about.
Yeah, I think that you both are in time zones that are in opposite directions of me, in the opposite direction, which makes it difficult to have, let's say, do a stream with everybody. What were my other notes?
Because I think it would be helpful if it was just really definitively clear and consistent at what it was that it was saying. Yeah, I am like 90% behind the initiative. I think it's a great idea. I just don't want to see it kill games as a service. I just want to see that games as a service require truth in advertising.
What are the biggest offenders that you can think of off the top of your head when it comes to truth in advertising? Within the game industry, just to be clear, because my God, that question.
All of the current live service games. It's just the way the industry currently markets them is they don't have they're not. It's okay. Let's be honest. Everybody knows what they're buying. It's not like it's a secret. Everybody knows you're buying something that runs on a server and what it's going to do. It's not like nobody knows this. Everybody knows what you're buying.
Can you give me an example of something? Because I would just love to look at the page and get my ignorant idea of what do I even know what it is that I'm buying off of quickly looking at it. Like, you have an example?
Call of Duty? I don't know. There's lots. Call of Duty would be one of them.
Okay, Call of Duty. Let's see.
To be honest, I don't play these games much, so they're not really my thing.
Okay, so I search. Call of Duty 6 Black Ops $44.99.
I could tell you how to architect one, but they're not really my thing on playing them.
Yeah, I would assume if I go to Walmart and I pay $70 for this game, that like it's my game. How is this? So how is this not truthfully advertised? I look at this at Walmart. It looks like I buy it. I get a disc or something.
See, okay, I'll admit this might just be being too close to the problem. I've been doing software my entire life. To me, it's bluntly obvious, and I would think that for gamers who buy games on a regular basis, like you don't play games on a regular basis.
It says internet required on it. Okay, so when I see internet required, I assume that means. Yeah, I don't now. Obviously, at this point in my life, I realize out of the cynicism and all the right to own shit that means that this is gonna stop working at some point in time. But me as a kid, like 17-year-old me, or even 25-year-old me, like 25-year-old me would look at this and think, "Oh, I may need the internet for a multiplayer feature. Oh, I need the internet to download this thing." But there's no way that this would ever be turned off, right? Like this is, I would not assume that this is.
I'm just too cynical. Maybe I'm just too cynical. But yeah, I agree with you. It's not sufficient. It should be better. It should be on the box. I think there should be I think you basically if they want to have a. I did some research. I was curious. I tried to find if there's any other things that have a fixed price for a service. I couldn't actually find any. Well, that's not true. Antiviruses do it. Things like security cameras and stuff do it. But I couldn't find anything besides antiviruses and live service games. Those seem to be the only things that do this. But it is legitimate to buy. It is legitimate to pay a certain price and get a fixed amount of service. Like going back to the analogy, I can go to a gym and say I want to buy a year's worth of service, or I can go to like a VPN provider and say I want to buy a year's worth of VPN service or something like that. You can buy bulk service for a one-time price. That is a legit thing, but they're not clear about it. No, there's no they're not telling you what you're doing, and they're not giving you a time period. And I think that is illegitimate. I don't think that's cool. I think they should have to do that. I think they should have to give you, what are you getting for this? What time period? What service are you buying?
Yeah, I agree with the idea with the truth in advertising or having an expiration date on it. At the same time, there's something feels weird to me about the idea that I would not be like, if Pac-Man were a service in 1985, and I would have never gotten to play Pac-Man, and there's just something weird about the idea that I could watch a VHS tape of other people playing Pac-Man, but I couldn't. Like, I want my kids and my grandkids to be able to have the experience of playing Pac-Man. Maybe they don't need
Yeah,
to have the experience of playing
but
Call of Duty Black Ops 6. They could play the other bunch of them.
but Pac-Man was a small little thing that ran on your little computer, and some of the modern multiplayer games are just massive things that run in data centers. They're fundamentally different.
Yeah, and if they wanted to roam around in the dark eating pellets that make them think everything is changing colors, they could just go to Burning Man or something.
So, life is we don't. Life is complicated. Not everything is simple. We don't always get everything we want, but it's the real world. It would be nice if we got everything we want, but it just isn't that way. But software written for a data center is written specifically for a data center, and it's not always easy to extract. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. Sometimes you can build things that can be extracted, but the modern cloud software, and it keeps getting more so. The way you build it is you build it with a whole lot of cloud specific components, and this is going to continue getting more the case. It's going to get harder and harder to take those things out of the data center.
One of the things that the Pirate Software Thor said is that this is vague. Many times he said that this is vague. What are the items that you feel are vague as a software architect looking at this from that perspective, where you think, I really want an answer to X, Y, and Z, and I can't find it easily?
I don't think it's vague. I think it's inconsistent. I don't get his. Maybe he meant inconsistent by vague. I don't know. I don't. I'm not Thor. I'm not in his head. I have no idea what the hell he meant by anything. So yeah. I don't know what he meant by vague. I don't think it's vague. I think it's inconsistent.
Yeah, because when he was talking about trying to convert a multiplayer game into a single player game, and like that not being the thing, I think like what he was trying to work backwards to figure out, there are all these services that get used for multiplayer games. I don't have a license to this. I can't write this shit on my own, so I have to strip it out of the game and make it single player. And I think he was maybe working in his head backwards, trying to figure out, how do I make this compliant with this if I do not have the right to give you a server binary, or I don't even have this thing on my computer. I don't even have access to it, so I couldn't even give it to you if I wanted to pirate it and do something illegal.
Okay. So I think he might have been simplifying. So if I no, I'm not going to do that. I was going to say if I try to step inside his head, but I don't want to do that. That's scary.
Don't do that. Don't.
Yes, I'm not going to do that. So he might have been trying to simplify. So if you've got a system that was designed for data centers, and all of a sudden you have to put that on a smaller home computer or something, one way to do that might be to just try to strip everything out and simplify it down to a single player game. And maybe that was what he was thinking, and he just wasn't explaining it. I don't know. I'm not Thor. I can't read his mind. Maybe that's what he was thinking. I don't know.
Okay. There was one video that Ross had done about live service games, or live service or service games being, I want to get the title of it because I want to, games as a service is fraud. I have not watched this one because I've watched a few of Ross's videos. I haven't watched all of them, and I'd love to talk to him about this. But he's talking about games of service and why they are a fraud. What did you think when you saw this, and what were your?
Yeah, so I have real problems with that video. I got very annoyed when I started watching the video. At the very beginning of the video, he has a section called definitions, and he makes it very clear that he is completely against software as a service. I get the impression he doesn't think it should exist at all. And then he goes through the definitions of what comprises software as a service. And he says that, software as a service, it may or may not have microtransactions, and it may or may not have subscriptions. So so basically a game as a service. So a game as a service, if it runs in a data center, if it requires to run in a data center, if it has a subscription, or if it doesn't have a subscription, but it runs in a data center, it's a service. If it has microtransactions, or if it doesn't have microtransactions, as long as it runs in a data center, it's a service. And he goes through this in the definitions. So this really annoyed me, because this basically says that games as a service, he doesn't think they should exist. And it kind of makes it imply that his initiative for Stop Killing Games is designed to kill an entire class of games, which I have a problem with. And then as you start listening to the video, more of the video, he gets to a portion where he mentions WoW, World of Warcraft. And he says, World of Warcraft has a subscription, so it gets a free pass. It doesn't count. But wait, in the definitions, he said it doesn't matter if it has a subscription, it's still a service and it counts. So in the same video, he contradicts himself. This goes back to, he's inconsistent. I don't know what he's talking about.
When it comes to what is a service and what is not a service, or what is a game versus a service, this is being pedantic, but I mean it seriously. I was trying to set up this the guide, like 900-page thing on how to run every single Google, Amazon, Microsoft kind of thing using open source software in your house. And I tried to podge so much crap together. And one of them was when I was trying to make an alternative to Google Docs and Google Sheets. I was trying to use something called OnlyOffice. And I wanted to set it up in a way where if I put documents on my server, the documents that I put on that server would then be able to be readable by that server. And the problem that I ran into is that was not put together for that use case. It was designed for me to upload and work on documents within the web GUI in the program. It wasn't designed for, I'm going to have 10 documents that I put in this folder on the server, and then it sees them. Now, it had cloud connectivity features, so the way that I got around this is, you're going to laugh, is I put a WebDAV server on that server that then served the documents to OnlyOffice, so that OnlyOffice would see them. So when it comes to a service, like, when is it a game versus a service? What is different about the service being run on my computer versus the service being run on your computer for it being considered a service? Because if a game is a service, as long as you have these type of client server architecture, if the server is running on my computer and it's all running internally, when does it stop being a game versus a game as a service versus a service?
Okay, I think you're conflating the term service with a service that runs on your computer. Like, if you go into Windows and you go into services, you've got Windows services, versus service in the legal definition of something you pay for, that you get a right to, you get a service from somebody. Like, you get a service, you pay somebody to come out and fix your air conditioner or something. That's a service. That's the difference. Software as a service is a service in the legal definition, as you're paying for a service. It's not a service as in something that runs on your computer. That's what software as a service is.
Yes, I mean, they've taken, if something is taken that used to run on my computer and now it's running on yours, but has the ability to run on mine. Yeah, I guess it gets squirrely really quickly. Or maybe it's just
right. Well, generally speaking, software is when something is a service that you pay for, it generally, it's because it can't run on your computer. It runs in the data center, and it's designed to run in the data center, because it's something that. Now, I'm not going to say some companies don't abuse this, because some companies actually do abuse this, and they shouldn't abuse this. But in general, it runs in the data center because it needs to run in the data center. Companies shouldn't abuse this for other purposes. But in general, like World of Warcraft is not going to run on your old computer. It's meant to be in the data center because it runs for multiple millions of people who all play together. That's why it's in the data center. Not because they don't want you to run it locally. It's there for a reason. It should be there for a reason. That's why it's a service. That's why people subscribe to it, because it's there. And that's what they design it for. It's designed to do that purpose. That's what That's what they created the game for. That's what they designed the game for. That was their purpose. That's what they marketed it as. That's what they sold it as. That's what you paid for it to get, and that's what you got.
Okay, I wanted to get your idea on that because I was thinking about that when it's if it's this, if a game is a game, or it's not a it's a service because it's something that you're paying for where you're making a call to somebody else's computer and you as a client make a call to the other person's computer and then you get something back and that's what makes it a service. But if that's something that used to be able to be done on my computer, if is the client server, is it not a service? Or is it no longer a service simply because it's running on my computer now? Like instead of connecting to a WebDAV server that's hosted in AWS, I'm connecting to the WebDAV server that's on my only office computer downstairs because that fucking software was never made with the idea that I should be able to access files that are actually on it. But that's also, it's getting close to midnight and my brain is kind of turning off. So that was probably a stupid question.
Oh, I mean, it depends on the scale and stuff. So I mean, like some things, if it's a small game that's designed for 15 people to go in and interact with themselves in an environment and do things, that's probably something that should be able to run on your local computer, and that's probably they put it. It can run on the cloud, but it should also run on your local computer probably. That probably doesn't need to run in the cloud. But if it's something that's designed to literally run on millions of people, it makes sense for it to run in the cloud, and it doesn't really make sense for them to design and build that to run on your local machine.
Yeah, also, I wanted to put an image on the screen. You had made something with very, very crudely with AWS that just goes over what the service, what people think gaming architecture looks like and what it actually looks like.
Yeah, I just mocked that up real quick. That's not real. I just threw that together as an example, but it's basically like there was an example diagram. I think it was in the FAQ or somewhere on the Stop Killing Games site of like, here's an example of a diagram, and I saw that and I just laughed and I'm like, wow, that is so simple. So I just basically threw the other one together real quick as like, no, this is more of an example of what one might look like.
Now, there are some people that have said if you're forced to come up with an end-of-life plan at the very beginning, that this may lead to development being done in a way that makes more sense overall. Is that true, or is that just like wishful thinking?
It depends on the scale of the game and what the game is. So if the game is, like I said, if the game is a player versus player thing, and there's only one real server, and it's not using, it depends. There's no good way to answer that. In some cases, yes. I mean, there's at least a couple of game developers that did release their servers to the public. So I mean, it can be done, but you can't say that it can be done in all cases. It's not reasonable to insist it's done in all cases. That's the thing. And the thing is, if they're not marketing it to you that way and they're not selling it to you that way, I don't think they should be forced to required to do it that way. That's not what you're buying. When I played World of Warcraft, I never expected that. I was buying a service and I was paying for it, and I enjoyed my time using it. When I stopped using it, I never expected them to give it to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand. Well, I thank you for answering a bunch of very ignorant questions and giving me the perspective that I wish had been provided originally by the person who's a game developer influencer. It was very useful, and I learned something from it.
It's not a problem. I hope it was helpful.
All right, that's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. Man, I'm gonna get some sleep. I look beat.